Can you describe the New Jerusalem and what our roles as believers will be in it? Wow, that's a great question. I'm glad that's the last one because that's going to be a doozy. And here's kind of a follow-up what we'll be doing in the millennium. All right. Well, first of all, if you've kind of been following what I've been doing, I'm really excited because I'm working on a movie trilogy. I'm working on the script as we speak. I've hired a nice guy to write it, who's a professional screenwriter. And I won't give you too many details because I don't want to give it away, but I can kind of give you the theological points that go into it. So by the time we get to the millennium, just to kind of paint the picture where we've been, we obviously have had the false prophet and the Antichrist who have risen up. They have deceived the world. They, at least in my story, they build a city called Babel, all right? And Babel is really the antithesis to the New Jerusalem. So everything that is kind of tempting from Babel, all of the marvels of modern technology, et cetera, in Babel is going to be countered by the New Jerusalem, right? So all these promises that you have in Babel of becoming your own man, of doing things your own way, becoming a god, those will ultimately fail, and then we will have the true fulfillment in the New Jerusalem. And here's where I differ from a lot of teachers. I would suggest that the new heavens and earth are going to take place at the beginning of the millennium. Now, I grew up as a dispensationalist, and so I heard that, you have the rapture, then we have the tribulation, then we have the return of Jesus, and then we have this millennial time. And the millennium is kind of the earth is basically kind of patched up, right? It's remodeled a bit, but it's still the same earth, and it's just remodeled. The Jews will be here. We're going to be up in heaven, circling somehow in the New Jerusalem, and we have some role, but not really. And this is kind of the Jews' time to have the spotlight. And at the end of that 1,000 years, Satan gets out, does his thing, and then God, basically takes TNT and blows it up. And then we have a new heavens and a new earth after the 1,000 years. And that was the model that I had for most of my life. Probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in there, maybe 9 or 10 by now. But I was just looking at the verses, and there are a number of verses that caused me to look at things very differently. I was actually teaching through Isaiah 65, and I thought, I just cannot resolve this. This doesn't make sense according to the model that I had back then. All right, so let me read for you in Isaiah chapter 65. I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can have a look at it for yourself. I find that's always a better way to go so that you can see it and not have to take my word for it. So here we are. We're in Isaiah chapter 65. And let's start back here so you kind of get some context. So he says, because the former troubles are forgotten, because they are hidden from my eyes, behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former should not be remembered or come to mind. Again, that's the former troubles. Oh, not come to mind. All right, so he's going to make a new heavens and a new earth. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem as rejoicing, and her people the joy. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. No more shall an infant from there live but a few days, nor an old man who has not fulfilled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, and the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. Now, it was at this point I thought, no, wait a second. If we have the new heavens and earth, which he just told us that he says he's going to make a new heavens and earth, how can it be that we still have the potential for death? Now, granted, if you die at 100, you're considered a child, and apparently if you die at 100, you're somehow a sinner. All right, so it's not just, average lifespans and people die. It's not that kind of stuff. No, there's something very, very different about this time. And so I started thinking, well, wait a second. If we've got the new heavens and earth here, What about Revelation? But before I get there, I want to go to Isaiah 66 just really quickly to show, again, more context where God says again, for as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants and your name remain. All right, so here we have context, new heavens and earth. And then he says, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord. They shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm does not die and their fire is not quenched. They shall be in accordance to all flesh. I'm like, wow, this is pretty amazing stuff. First of all, we see that this kind of this scene from hell, as it's often referred to, or as Gehenna, that Jesus quotes in the book of Luke, book of Mark, chapter 9, where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. That is a direct reference to these dead bodies that people are going to look at in this time when we are in the new heavens and the new earth. So what's going on with that? And so then I went to Revelation chapter 21. And this is where I kind of got this clue. It says, now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. I was like, oh, wait a second. I can count, right? After one comes two, right? And after first comes second. All right, so if John says that he sees a new heaven and a new earth, because for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, I was like, oh, so if the first heavens and earth have passed away, then what is he seeing? He's now seeing the second heaven and earth, the second new heaven and the new earth. So there's only going to be two sets. That's it, only two sets. And so therefore, this idea that the millennium will be some kind of a patched up, remodeled earth, it doesn't make sense. And that's not the only scripture. I mean, I made an entire huge list of scriptures that talk about this. And so then I came to First Peter or Second Peter 3:10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. I was like, well, there you go. We have this, the current heavens and the elements of the earth are going to be burned up. When? In the day of the Lord, which comes how? As a thief in the night. And then I went from there to First Thessalonians chapter 5. What does Paul say? But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. Now, I used to think that the thief in the night was a reference to the rapture, because that's what I was taught. And then I kept reading, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because what does Paul say? But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. All right, so the people that are going to be surprised like it's a thief in the night will not be the believers in some secret rapture, but it will be the unbelievers, which really makes a lot of sense because they don't believe in God. They don't think there is a God. And they're going to be really surprised when he comes back. Then I found another passage. This is in Habakkuk chapter 3. In Habakkuk chapter 3, it says God really comes from, or will come from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran, Selah. His glory covered the heavens, and the earth was full of his praise. His brightness was like the light, and his rays flashing from his hand, and there his power was hidden. Before him went pestilence, and fever followed at his feet. Notice this. He stood and measured the earth. He looked and startled the nations. All right, why are people startled? Because they're not expecting him to come, right? They're like, whoa, who are you? And then we go to Revelation chapter 6. Revelation chapter 6 is when we see this incredible thing here in the sixth seal. I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who is able to stand? Well, this is just a little bit of the journey that I was on, discovering that the new heavens and earth are going to take place very shortly after the return of Jesus. Because when he comes, the earth is absolutely trashed. All the high towers have been thrown down. Every mountain has been thrown down. The oceans have turned to blood. The grass has been burned up. The trees have been burned up. Animals galore are dead. It's a nasty cesspool. And who would want to live in that place? And so as I put together Isaiah and Revelation and Habakkuk and Second Peter and many other scriptures, Isaiah chapter 2, the list goes on. There's so many. I had to come to the conclusion that the new heavens and earth are going to happen shortly after the return of Jesus. I don't know the exact day, of course. I don't know. That's it. That's privy to him. But sometime after he's finished, I presume, he's finished sentencing the bad people for all their bad stuff, certainly the Antichrist and the false prophet, putting Satan away and all that. I'm probably, after he throws Satan into the abyss, shortly thereafter, he will recreate the new heavens and earth. And it's going to be a glorious time. Okay, so with that in mind, the next thing is that the new Jerusalem is going to come down to planet Earth. It's going to come down to planet Earth. The new Jerusalem. First of all, the new Jerusalem looks like a mountain. It's described as a mountain in many places. It's not a cube. Again, I grew up with that idea that it's a cube, but we see in so many places that it's described as a mountain. Think about Isaiah chapter 11. You recall this passage where Satan thinks that he's going to overtake God, and he gets these delusions of grandeur. And what does he say? He says, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount or mountain of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. Keep that phrase in mind. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High, but you'll be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. All right, so the farthest sides of the north is something that we find in the book of Psalms, this idea of the farthest sides of the north. First of all, before we go there, let's go to Ezekiel chapter 28. Where was Satan? It says, you were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. So he's in this gorgeous place, and he's on some kind of a mountain. Well, we are told in Psalm 48, great is the city of the Lord, and greatly to be praised is the city of our God in his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north. There you have it again. Yarchete Tzafon, that's the same phrase that was used in Isaiah chapter 14. And then we go from there, this idea of this mountain, and we go to Hebrews chapter 12. In Hebrews chapter 12, the writer tells us concerning where the people have been and where they are now. He says in verse 18, you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest. That's talking about Mount Sinai, of course, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. No. He says, but you have come to Mount Zion. Again, mount is the word for mountain, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem to an innumerable company of angels. So this heavenly Jerusalem is described as a mountain in so many different places. I'm not getting into the math, but I think the dimensions are about 196 miles on each edge. So that would be a total, if you add those 8 edges of a pyramid up, they total 12,000 stadia, or 1,374 miles, I think it is. So it's not each edge is that, but it's the sum total of the edges. It's still a gigantic mountain, 30 times higher than Mount Everest, but it is something that would actually fit on the planet. And so this city comes down onto planet Earth, but nobody can go in it except unless they have taken of the river of life and the tree of life. And everybody will be given that opportunity to take of the tree of life. You recall in Revelation 22, you have the Spirit and the bride. What do they say? The Spirit and the bride say, "Come." Let him who hears say, "Come." And let him who thirsts come. Whoever desires, let him take the water of life freely. Okay, so the water of life is available. Why is it necessary? Well, it says in Revelation 22:14, "Blessed are those who do his commandments." Another translation, "Blessed are those who wash their garments." There's a manuscript issue there, but blessed are those who wash their garments. I think that's probably the more likely translation, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city, but outside of the dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters and everyone who loves and practices a lie. Well, this makes good sense because it says in Revelation 21, "But there shall by no means enter the city anything that defiles or causes an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life." All right, so there will be mortals on planet Earth. They will have the ability to have children and to build houses and have vineyards and just great stuff. But they will also have the potential of death, even though they will have extended lives. If they die at 100, they're thought a child. If they die at 100, they're considered a sinner. Something was definitely wrong with this person. He died at 100. I mean, who's ever heard of anybody dying at 100? That's going to be the idea. And so there will be a fountain in Jerusalem for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. They will be able to take of the river of life. And once they've taken of the river of life, which is coming out from the throne of God, it goes down the sides of the mountains, and it then provides sustenance to the uh, to the planet. And it says, "In the middle of its street and on either side of the river, the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations." So they can then take these leaves, they can consume them, and these leaves will transform them. They will heal the nations, and then they will be able to enter in to the New Jerusalem. All right, so that's just a little sketch of some of the things that are going to happen during the tribulation or during the millennium. What will we be doing if we're in our new bodies? We're going to be ruling and reigning with God. Those who are faithful over a little will be given more, so that if you're faithful in this life, you'll be given maybe 1 city or 5 cities or 10 cities. We're not told entirely all that's going to happen. So we don't know. We can only take little snapshots of what's going to happen. We do know that at the very end, there will be a final rebellion by Satan. And so, I think there'll just be kind of a good life. People will enjoy a good life, but then some people will kind of get prideful. They will decide that they could do things better if they could do it their own way, and they will eventually stage a coup. Satan will be their champion, and they will attempt to to um, stage a coup against the New Jerusalem, which is on the planet. So they will come up above over the broad plain of the earth, and they'll surround the camp of the saints and the beloved city, which is the New Jerusalem, and they will attempt to take it. But ultimately, they are going to fail. So those are the snapshots that we have. All of that to say that that's going to be in the movie. Okay, that'll be movie number 3 of the trilogy. So very, very exciting things that are coming. I can hardly wait till we can see this. in color. We can see it on the big screen. We can see all of these things acted out, some amazing graphics. And I really believe it's gonna touch a lot of people that are gonna get excited about what is coming.